A couple spent nearly a decade carving a homestead out of raw wilderness, felling their own trees, raising walls by hand, pouring every dollar and every weekend into 500 acres of nothing until it became something people drove across the country to see. Then Alcide and Gina Lumna, the husband and wife team behind Lumnah Acres, one of YouTube's most watched homesteading channels, with over 350,000 subscribers and 191 million views, made a decision that split their audience right down the middle. They walked away from all of it. By the end of this story, you'll understand why leaving the homestead they built from nothing wasn't the end of Lumnah Acres. It was the first time they actually became what they'd been claiming to be all along, before any of this existed. Before the barn, before the chickens, before a single camera ever rolled. Al Lumna was grinding through contractor work south of Boston. Alcide Lumna, born and raised near the city, earned his living as a subcontractor. He framed houses, he poured foundations. He showed up before sunrise, left when the light ran out, and brought home just enough to keep the wheels turning. It was steady work, the kind of job that pays the bills but slowly hollows out the person doing it. Gina, his wife since June of 2005, came from a completely different world. She held a bachelor's degree and a master's in education. She worked as a tutor, the kind of patient, methodical person who could explain something 15 different ways until it clicked. Between the two of them, Gina was the one with the stable paycheck, the benefits, the career you could explain to your parents without them wincing. They had a daughter, Olivia. A small family in a part of New England where small families either stay put and play it safe or make one enormous, irreversible bet. Al and Gina chose the bet. They started looking at land, not suburban lots with white picket fences, not hobby farms with a realtor's promise of country charm. They were looking for raw, uncleared, unimproved land in northern New Hampshire, the kind of property most people wouldn't even consider habitable, the kind of place where there's no electricity, no running water, no road to the front door, and no one around to help when something goes wrong. They found it in Littleton, New Hampshire, over 500 acres of dense woodland, steep terrain, and silence. No structures, no infrastructure, nothing but trees, rock, and potential. They bought it, and the day they closed, the real work started. But here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. Al didn't hire a crew. He didn't bring in excavators or contract out a foundation pour. He picked up a chainsaw, walked into the tree line, and started clearing. Every tree that came down was milled into lumber. Every piece of lumber became part of the house, the barn, or the fencing. The Lumnas weren't just homesteading. They were manufacturing their own raw materials from the property itself. The centerpiece was the log cabin, post and beam construction, built almost entirely from timber harvested on site. Al handled the heavy structural work, the kind of framing he'd done for years on other people's houses, except now he was building his own, on his own schedule, on his own terms. Gina managed the planning, the logistics, and increasingly the camera. Because somewhere in the middle of all that sawdust and sweat, they'd started filming. The channel launched around 2014 and found its rhythm quickly. Al's delivery was natural. No script, no teleprompter. Just a guy with a thick Boston accent opening every video with "Good morning, modern steaders," and closing with an invitation to come back next time. He talked to the camera the way he'd talk to a neighbor leaning on the fence. That warmth became the channel's signature. They raised Icelandic chickens, one of the rarest breeds in the world, chosen specifically because they thrive in snow, which matters when your homestead sits in northern New Hampshire where winter lasts 5 months. The chicken coop became famous in its own right. Fans named it New York City. They added Nubian dwarf goats, pigs, a greenhouse built in partnership with Rimmel Greenhouse Systems, documented day by day in a series that became a blueprint for other homesteaders. Cattle panels became their signature growing system, repurposed as trellising for vegetables and as mobile structures for rotating livestock. Every project was documented. Every failure was shown. Every success was earned on camera. And that's when the decision was made, the one nobody around them saw coming. The growth didn't come from one video. It came from consistency. 3 uploads a week, every week, for years. But if there was a single turning point, it was the Great American Farm Tour. Justin Rhodes, one of the most recognized names in the permaculture YouTube space, featured Lumnah Acres on his cross-country series documenting small farms. Rhodes visited the property, walked the land with Al, and filmed the operation from the ground up. The response was immediate. Rhodes' audience, already primed for homesteading content, flooded into Lumnah Acres' subscriber base. Comments piled up. Al's use of chickens to restore an orchard became a talking point across multiple farming communities online. From there, the channel compound grew. A time-lapse of the post and beam barn build, a kit they'd purchased online and assembled themselves, went viral, becoming one of their most viewed videos of all time. Sponsorships followed. TYM tractors came on board in 2021, and Al upgraded to a T574, a North America Series 3 model that became the go-to workhorse for everything from septic installation to snow clearing to barn construction. Factor Meals, Cowboy Colostrum, Rimmel, Cove Pure. The brand partnerships stacked up, each one tied directly to the content rather than awkwardly shoehorned in. By late 2024, the numbers told the story clearly. Over 350,000 subscribers, more than 191 million total views, nearly 1,900 videos uploaded. 3 new videos dropping every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. A merchandise line running through their own website. A coffee brand. A P.O. box in Littleton that stayed full. Gina, who had started as the quiet presence behind the camera, the one keeping the household solvent with her tutoring income while Al swung hammers, had evolved into an equal on-screen partner. Her education background showed in the way she organized projects, broke down plans for the audience, and handled the growing business side of the operation. The homestead was finished. The channel was thriving. The family was stable. By every metric that matters in the YouTube homesteading world, Lumnah Acres had made it. Which is exactly why what happened next confused everyone who'd been watching. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. After nearly a decade of building, cutting, milling, framing, wiring, plumbing, planting, and filming every single step, Al and Gina made an announcement that stopped the comment section cold. They had purchased a second property, a 150-year-old vacant farm. Not a cabin in the woods, not another patch of raw land to clear. A historic farm, with existing structures, old barns, and cleared fields that hadn't been worked in years. The kind of place that represents the opposite of everything Lumnah Acres had been built on. The channel description changed. The branding shifted. The new mission statement read, "After years of living off-grid and building our homestead from scratch, we've taken on a whole new adventure. We've bought a 150-year-old vacant farm, a place we've dreamed about for years. Now, we're working to breathe new life into it and transform it into something even better. A thriving regenerative farm." Regenerative farming, not off-grid homesteading, not self-sufficiency in the woods. Regenerative agriculture, a philosophy rooted in restoring degraded land, building soil health, and integrating livestock into managed grazing systems. It was a philosophical pivot as much as a physical one. The audience fractured. Long-time subscribers who had followed the off-grid build from the first chainsaw cut felt abandoned. The homestead was their story too. They'd watched it grow, commented on every milestone, argued about chicken breeds in the replies. Hearing that Al and Gina were shifting focus to a different property felt like the final chapter of their favorite book had been ripped out and replaced with the opening of a different one. Others saw it differently. They saw a family that had outgrown the project that made them famous. The homestead was built. The systems were running. The barn was standing. What was left to film? Routine maintenance? Season after season of the same chores? For a channel built on the drama of building something from nothing, the nothing was gone. The challenge was over. And without challenge, the content would stagnate. Most people who know this story stop here. But the real story starts right now. In July of 2025, a vehicle pulled up to the 150-year-old farm, and out stepped Joel Salatin. If you don't know that name, here's what you need to understand. Joel Salatin is arguably the most influential figure in regenerative agriculture alive today. He runs Polyface Farms, a 700-acre operation in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley that has become the global template for sustainable, animal-driven land restoration. He's been featured in documentaries, best-selling books, and on stages in front of thousands of farmers. His family restored 14 inches of topsoil on eroded Virginia farmland without a single drop of chemical fertilizer. When Joel Salatin shows up at your farm, it means something. He walked the property with Al and Gina. He assessed the soil, the water flow, the existing structures, the cleared fields, and the surrounding woodland. Together, they mapped out a regenerative plan: how to integrate livestock rotation, how to build soil organically, how to turn a 150-year-old vacant property into a functioning regenerative operation. Lumnah Acres posted about the visit. The response was immediate, and it shifted the conversation. Fans who had been skeptical of the pivot suddenly saw the ambition behind it. This wasn't a couple abandoning their homestead to play farmer on a prettier property. This was a couple who had spent a decade learning how to build from scratch, and were now applying those skills at a higher level, with one of the most respected mentors in the world standing beside them. The Salatin consultation represented something most homestead channels never achieve: external validation from the top of the industry. This wasn't a brand deal. This wasn't a sponsored segment. This was the godfather of regenerative farming saying, "This land has potential, and these people can do it." She never talked about this publicly. Until now, the plan was ambitious. The property had other ideas. Within weeks of beginning the renovation of the 150-year-old farmhouse, Al and Gina discovered structural problems. Not cosmetic issues, not peeling wallpaper or sagging floors. Structural damage. The kind of problems that force you to stop, reassess, and completely rethink the project timeline. In August 2025, they posted a video titled, "We Found Structural Problems: Renovating Our 150-Year-Old Farmhouse." The footage showed Al pulling back layers of old construction to reveal compromised framing, damaged supports, and the kind of wear that 150 years of New Hampshire weather inflicts on timber. The renovation wasn't going to be a cosmetic refresh. It was going to be a rebuild. By September, the scope had shifted so dramatically that they posted another video. "We need to pivot this entire project." The original plan, whatever it had been, was off the table. The farmhouse needed more time, more money, and more labor than they'd anticipated. For most creators, this would have been a crisis. For Lumnah Acres, it was content gold. Because here's what Al and Gina understood that most homestead channels don't. The audience didn't fall in love with the finished product. They fell in love with the process, the struggle, the moment where everything goes sideways and you have to figure it out with the tools in your hand and the daylight you have left. That was the essence of the original homestead build, and it was happening all over again, on a bigger stage, with higher stakes. The farmhouse renovation series became the new backbone of the channel. Uploads continued 3 times per week. Each video tracked a specific phase of the rebuild: foundation work, structural reinforcement, insulation, interior framing. Al's construction background, the same skill set he'd built as a subcontractor outside Boston, became the narrative engine. He wasn't just a homesteader with a camera anymore. He was a builder restoring a piece of American agricultural history. The number that came next, nobody who followed this channel expected it. Between June and December of 2025, while the renovation was consuming every hour of daylight Al had, the channel added 12,000 new subscribers. The farmhouse content was landing. The regenerative farming angle was attracting a new demographic: viewers who might never have watched an off-grid cabin build, but were deeply interested in soil restoration, livestock management, and sustainable agriculture. Highland cattle became the visual anchor. Al and Gina had purchased their first Highland cows in April 2024, and the shaggy, photogenic animals quickly became fan favorites. Gina took point on the cattle operation, managing the herd, coordinating with breeders, and documenting the integration of the animals into the regenerative grazing plan that Salatin had helped design. The Lumnah Acres breeder listing in Littleton, New Hampshire became active, marking their transition from hobbyist homesteaders to registered agricultural producers. Meanwhile, there were signs that the original off-grid property, the 500-acre homestead where it all began, had been sold. A Facebook post from the channel referenced exciting news, alongside the words "sold" and "farm" in the same URL. No formal announcement was made on the main channel, but the evidence pointed in one direction. The Lumnahs had let go of the property they'd spent a decade building. If true, it represents one of the most significant decisions in the homesteading YouTube space. Channels are built on locations. The land isn't just a backdrop, it's a character. Selling the original homestead would mean permanently closing that chapter, with no option to return. Through early 2026, the renovation pushed forward. New videos landed in March, covering everything from major deliveries for the farmhouse to fine detail work on the interior. The channel's online store went under construction. A full overhaul, not just a refresh, with the promise of new products tied to the farm's regenerative mission. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got. Until now. The part of this story that most viewers never processed is Gina's arc. In the early years, she was functionally invisible on camera. Al was the face of Lumnah Acres, the Boston accent, the morning greeting, the chainsaw in one hand and a camera in the other. Gina's contribution was structural but silent. She was the family's financial anchor, Her tutoring income paid the bills while Al spent his days clearing land and building structures that wouldn't generate revenue for years. Without her steady paycheck, the homestead doesn't get built. The channel doesn't get launched. The dream stays a dream. She held 2 degrees in education. She understood systems, planning, and how to break complex projects into teachable steps. When the channel grew large enough to demand a second on-screen presence, Gina didn't just appear. She elevated the content. Her segments were organized, detailed, and structured in a way that reflected her training. She brought a teacher's discipline to a format that thrives on chaos. By 2025, the channel description listed them as equals. We're Al and Gina, a husband and wife team. Not Al's channel featuring Gina. Not Al builds things while his wife watches. Equal billing, equal presence, equal ownership of the brand. Her transition mirrors the channel's own evolution. Lumnah Acres started as one man with a chainsaw and a camera. It became a family operation. Then it became a registered agricultural business. Gina's journey from off-camera breadwinner to co-lead of a regenerative farming operation is, in many ways, the more compelling story. The one that played out quietly while the audience was distracted by barn builds and chicken coops. In the cattle operation at the new farm, that's primarily Gina's domain. She manages the Highland herd. She coordinates the breeding program. She's the one listed as the owner on the Lumnah Acres breeder profile. The woman who once kept the lights on with tutoring sessions now runs a livestock operation on a 150-year-old farm, guided by a regenerative blueprint designed by Joel Salatin. At this point in the story, most people walked away. What she did instead is the part nobody talks about. The meaning of Lumnah Acres was never the property. It was never the log cabin or the chicken coop or the 500 acres of New Hampshire wilderness. The meaning was the willingness to start from zero, and the proof that the people who do it once can do it again, bigger, on harder ground, with more at stake. Al and Gina are currently deep into the renovation of their 150-year-old farmhouse, posting 3 videos per week, raising Highland cattle, and building out the regenerative systems that Salatin helped them envision. Their online store is being rebuilt from the ground up. The channel continues to grow, and the audience that stayed through the pivot is watching something most homestead channels never deliver: a second act that's harder, messier, and more ambitious than the first. Would you have walked away from a homestead you spent 10 years building? Or is the only move that makes sense the one that terrifies you the most?